And now I have an introduction. Teachstone, as you know, delivers on the promise of class with a dynamic team of professionals, some of whom are watching from our home office this morning in Charlottesville, Virginia. We have to give a shout out to the people who are holding down the fort. Some of that team is made up of professionals with years and years of educational experience, and others bring key expertise from other fields to support our work on teacher-student interactions. And that's where you'll find our COO and Chief Product Officer, Mike Benzian. He is a guru in developing and cultivating products and services to meet the unique needs of different companies, and he has special knowledge in the area of e-learning. Although his background is not in educating students, he has extensive knowledge of interactions with his own 2 youngsters, one of whom just began to drive, so I'm hoping that you'll keep Mike's sanity in your thoughts. He needs it right now. And he knows firsthand the obstacles and successes of early childhood education because his wife is an early childhood education teacher. Over the years, Mike has become an awesome advocate for children and for their teachers. He's the consummate problem solver and is always thinking of ways to improve and focus classroom interactions and observations, as well as professional development. He has championed our brand new My Teachstone platform, leading its unbelievably dedicated team of creators and developers to great success. He is a fearless leader, a solution maker, a visionary. He is also an avid UVA sports fan, and he is the reigning champion in our office of this egg on a spoon race. He does that much better than I do. That's why he's the champion. So without further wait, Mike Benzian.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you came to listen to me talk for the next hour. How everybody knows Bob Pianta? Raise your hand. The man needs not much of an introduction. Come on up, Bob. Bob's the dean of the Curry School at the University of Virginia and the co-founder of Teachstone. And we're interested in hearing about what some of the projects he's working on and want to have an interactive session with you. So we'll be coming out to the audience to ask questions in a few minutes.
Great. I can't tell you how great it is to be here. I heard over the course of the day yesterday, some of the positive vibe that was emanating from Chicago, and that the sessions were lively and interactive, and it's very cool to be able to be here with you this morning, and I just want to thank you for the really, really good work that you're doing, and kind of at the outset state a real commitment to doing that work together, because I think that's ultimately where we'll make a difference. So despite American Airlines' best efforts to keep me from being here, I'm very glad that I'm here. I want to talk about kind of four ideas that I think are really important for us as we continue to work together in the future. So these probably won't be of any surprise to anybody, but and what I'll try to do is kind of update some of what I think is happening in each one of these. So first idea, interactions matter. Okay, big surprise, but interactions matter. Second is that we've got to be thinking about impact and scale together. Those things have to happen together. We have many, many, many tens of thousands of teachers that we need to reach, and we need to reach them effectively. That's really different than doing it one at a time, but we also have to do it sort of one at a time. So thinking about that is important. I'm going to talk about some new ideas and what we're learning around some new tools and kind of peering into the future a little bit, particularly around creating a profession that is a model for learning. I actually think the field of early childhood education has more opportunity to innovate, to be creative, to demonstrate to K-12 how you actually do it and do it well, particularly around workforce development. And that's a big opportunity for us. And then I want to just talk a little bit about how important a network is around this and working on this together. So interactions matter. When we started this a long time ago, and I think still to this day, what we're doing together is simply affirming what we all understand from our own experience and our own values, that human development depends upon the interactions between people, and particularly in an educational context between a teacher and a child. And we have many stories about that. And I think what we've been able to do over the course of the last several years is build a science around that and build tools around that, so that we're not a field that has to rely on stories anymore to actually say these things are important. Policy should be paying attention to these. Professional development, we should be investing in the interactions between teachers and kids. That's a really important and profound idea, and the fact that we've moved it collectively to a science is really a huge move. We now have, it's not just class, but if you just cut it on class, there's probably 300 to 400 studies that now demonstrate that the qualities of interactions that are rated by class, but it could be other kinds of things, produce better learning and development for kids. 300 or 400 studies. And that works in Ecuador, and it works in Chile, and it works in Turkey, and it works in China, and it works in LA, it works in Alaska, and it works in rural Wyoming, okay? So other thing that we're learning, I think, is that despite the ways in which culture and social class can create nuances around the meaning of interactions, that there's some core value about the quality of interactions that can be detected almost universally, okay? So that human interaction and teacher-child interaction, qualities of that can be a universal value for kids. And we can capture some of that universal value in the work we do. It doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of work to do to make sure that those are captured well in every different context and group. But there's something core about the quality of interactions that really does matter. And I think one of the ways we're seeing this is some research that we've been doing recently. Bridget led this. So we always talk about emotional support and organization and instructional support as being kind of the three big buckets of interaction. And there's no question that those buckets matter. Okay, there's no doubt about that, given the research that we have. But what we've done is kind of take another pass and say, what's common across all of those? And if you've been trained on the class, you have some sense that what each one of those dimensions is trying to capture is the back and forth. It's some quality of the back and forth between a teacher and a child. Sometimes that quality of back and forth is oriented around the kid's emotional state, and sometimes that quality of back and forth is organized around the kid's cognitive state and language development. But it's all about the back and forth. It's about whether I'm seeing and reading your cues and responding to them in a timely way. And when we extract that factor, just that quality from all of those different dimensions of the class, what we're finding is that quality of back and forthness that we've labeled responsivity, okay, is really accounting for kids learning across all domains, okay? It's sort of that universal property of interaction and a relationship that sustains kids' development in all domains: executive functioning, learning your language vocabulary, and getting better on math. And then there are sort of specific features of interaction that are maybe more focused on emotional support and self-regulation, that boost self-regulation, and then there are other features that focus more on cognition and boost cognition. So we're learning a little bit about what's common across all those class dimensions and what kind of is specific about each one of those. It's not ready for prime time yet. You know, I wouldn't want to send you out and sort of, okay, we got to redo the way we're working with teachers. Emotional support, instructional support, organization works really well to focus teachers' attention. But we are learning more and more about this kind of universal property that seems to be important. We're about to launch a really big study in Fairfax, Virginia. We're part of the new IES-funded Early Learning Network. And I think this is going to be an important study for a couple different reasons. So we're going to track all of the kids who enter Fairfax County's public system for pre-K and follow them every year, assessing them beginning the end of the year and observing in their classrooms using class and also observing the focus of the teacher's instruction. And we're going to observe that from pre-K all the way through third grade. Okay, so we have lived in a field of early childhood for the last umpteen years, routinely being able to prove that 1 year of pre-K is really helpful. Interactions are really helpful in that 1 year of pre-K, and then we don't know what happens between pre-K and third grade. And then kids get tested in third grade, and all of a sudden it's like, well, what happened to that pre-K effect? All right, and then all you are out there trying to defend pre-K against the people who want to, claim that it doesn't matter. All right, so we really need to figure out, okay, we need to figure out what the value is, not just of 1 year of a good teacher, but we need to understand how do we create teachers and what is the value of creating teachers year after year after year after year. So school and education is a ground game. You know, we dig in and it's a year after year after year. The effects are cumulative, okay? And we as a field in early childhood and in elementary have to do a much better job of gluing together those resources and beginning to figure out, okay, what are the features of those classroom experiences that matter for kids year after year after year. It's embarrassing to say in the year 2016 that the United States of America doesn't know the quality of experiences that kids are being offered pre-K, kindergarten, first, second, third, on a population basis. Okay, we don't know that. So this study is going to begin to help us understand that. The other thing that's going to help understand, I think, is really how do you put together and what is the value when teachers really put together good quality of interaction and good curriculum and activities, so that they're dealing both with the how to teach, which I think is what class does really, really well, and what to teach, and how to do that really appropriately for 4-year-olds, for 7-year-olds, for 8-year-olds. So that's going to be a pretty exciting study. We're also in that study really going to be looking at the role of kids' executive function. So one of the things I think we're learning is that these executive function skills really do develop in pre-K. They are, in some ways, when you write about preschool development, executive function is preschool development. That's what we want kids to be doing, connecting the emotional part of the brain with the cognitive part of the brain. And good interactions actually do that very, very well. So the more that we can learn about the contributions of teachers' interactions to executive function, and then the role that executive function plays in sustaining kids' success in school, I think is going to be a big, big game changer. Okay, so interactions matter. Impact and scale. So over and over and over again, if somebody said to me 10 years ago when we started doing interventions around interactions, and quite frankly, we did that basically because we were observing in a preschool teacher's classroom in Charlottesville, and we were piloting the class, and she said, I'd really like to know what you're observing me on. It's like, well, okay, that sounds like a good idea. So we shared with the teacher the class manual, and she said, oh, this is great. This is what I do. I'd really like, this could be a great professional development tool. I was like, duh. And, so that's where that came from, guys. It wasn't me. But if somebody said then that we'd be able to develop tools and supports for teachers that would actually be able to take something that we think is so complicated, how teachers interact with kids. It's like, this is too hard to change. It's too hard to do anything. We can only do it one at a time. And then be able to build systems in which we could reliably and confidently expose teachers to resources that help them improve their interaction. I said, no way that can happen. And yet, we now have results from experimental studies across the United States. We have results from colleagues in Chile who have done this work. We have results in K-12 and high school that have done this work that say, when you focus teachers' attention on their interactions, you keep it simple for them and you give them the right kind of support, you orient them around improvement of interactions and an orientation toward their competence in being able to interact with kids. When you do that, interactions improve. And it improves reliably and significantly and meaningfully for those teachers. They feel more effective, kids feel more engaged. So the challenge then, if we can reliably change interactions and improve them, the challenge becomes something like, how do we make this more efficient and how do we make this scalable so that more and more people can be exposed to these kind of resources? And I think that's just going to be something that, that we're going to have to work on together. That's a great project for us to work on together over the course of the next 5 years. How do we make these things simpler? How do we make them more focused? How do we help these tools move teachers in the right direction over time? I think a couple of things we're learning. So we did this study on my teaching partner coaching, and we tried to understand if a coach focused on emotional support, did emotional support change? If a coach focused on instructional support, did instructional support change? Lo and behold, what the coach focuses on changes. Okay, this is not rocket science. Okay, and in fact, because instructional support is tough and complicated to change, if you change that, the other stuff follows. Okay, so that's really important. Again, it helps us focus our efforts and keep things from both the coach's side and the teacher's side a little bit simpler. Another thing that we've learned in watching teachers over time, we have this kind of thing. This is I think a product of some of our theorizing and teacher preparation, but we have this kind of belief that if I want to change Mike as a teacher, which would probably be a really good thing to do, I'd sit Mike down and I'd talk to him about how he feels about teaching and his beliefs about teaching and his knowledge about teaching. And then somehow Mike would go in and be a better teacher. That has proven itself to doesn't work, okay? And in fact, it doesn't work for Mike, it doesn't work for a lot of other people too. But what we have learned is that if you actually start focusing on behavior, if I can get Mike to change his behavior in a little way with kids, that has a powerful impact on changing his beliefs about himself as a teacher and his understanding of his role as a teacher. So it's almost like beliefs in the psychology of teaching follow from the behavior of teaching. Okay, behave, be effective, see yourself as effective, and then your sense of effectiveness moves. That's a very different pathway to professional development than is, let's sit people in workshops and classrooms and talk to them about their beliefs all day long and hope for the best. Okay? It means that our work has to be much more practice-focused and job-embedded. I think this is, we are moving in a direction around impact and scale. I have a great belief, and I think we have early proof points. Bridget's done some great work on this, which is we're learning how to boil down some of the impacts of interventions like coaching and my teaching partner and interventions like the course we developed into this sense that the key ingredient here, guys, seems to be able to get teachers to see interactions moment to moment to moment in the classroom as they are interacting. Okay? If they can start seeing that, then they've got a compass and a tool to navigate those navigate their experience in the classroom with kids. And so what then becomes the possibility is, can we build professional development tools that really sit online or maybe scaled in a network where people are engaged around this activity of helping one another see? And that's a possible way to reach more and more and more people with the kind of resources that help focus their attention on interactions in the classroom. Another thing that we're seeing that we've got to be careful about, So we probably had, I think between Bridget and me, in the last month, we probably had half a dozen or more emails from colleagues across the country that have said, hey, I just got my class data back from looking at class scores across the year, and they're going down across the year. And so there is, these are not in intervention studies. These are just in kind of, I'm doing observations in this community. And I believe that there is a trend in some cases where the stress of teaching, and I think we all know this in some ways, the stress of teaching kind of erodes the qualities of interactions and energy that a teacher has over the course of the year. And we begin to see that in class scores that decline. They're not dropping off the table, but there's like this trend, and it's like, oh, we should be thinking about that, because we should be thinking about the ways in which, and we have evidence actually, that the professional development that we devote to interactions can reverse that decline. Okay, and so we want to have a better understanding of what that means and how to intervene. Okay, a couple things on new ideas. Am I taking up too much time?
No.
Okay.
Do you want to hear from me, or do you want to hear from Bob?
A couple things around new ideas. So I think it's very important. This summit is the first in what I hope will be many of these, and that we build a professional learning community. All right, one that really is learning to create and sustain the highest quality of professional practice out in the field for as many kids. And so that means the kinds of conversations that are taking place around how to make tools better, how to make them more usable, and the like. So some of the things that we've been learning and trying to innovate around that I think can be helpful for the field. So I mentioned this skill of seeing, and how important it is that teachers can. How important it is that it seems like if teachers can see things, moment-to-moment interactions, that's a thing they carry around in their head that kind of governs their quality of interactions in the classroom. Well, we're building an assessment of that. It's called the Video Assessment of Interactions in Learning. And we need to do a lot of work on this, but it's looking like that if you show a teacher a couple of videos and you ask them, again, this has to in a standardized way, but you ask them, tell me what this teacher is doing in this video that is effective for creating learning opportunities for this kid or these kids, and you get the teacher to kind of hone in on some specific examples. And this is all clunky right now, and we haven't figured out how to code it. But when we code it for both how specific the teacher is in identifying moment-to-moment interactions in the video, and whether her examples cover the breadth of interactions, so they're not just examples on classroom management, but they're examples on emotional support and instruction. When we put those things together, those scores are predicting her behavior in the classroom using the class. Okay, just a video. I show you a video, I can predict how well you're going to practice in the classroom. That is potentially an extraordinarily powerful tool in teacher preparation, in potentially certification and hiring practices for teachers. Again, we're way away from having that be something efficient, but I think that's the kind of thing that we can begin to work on. Another thing we're working on is, so there's a physiology to all of this, right? So teachers stress and children's stress, and the stress hormone of cortisol is something we're paying a lot of attention to, both in teachers and in kids. And we're finding, lo and behold, that higher quality interactions between teachers and kids produce less cortisol for kids in the classroom, when the routine trend is that kids over the course of the day show more cortisol. And we can actually take examples in which teachers are having a struggle with an individual kid, train those teachers a little bit to see kids' cues more directly and be more responsive to the kids, not take it as personally. And teacher stress goes down, kid stress goes down, kid becomes more cooperative with the teacher. So these are just hints at, again, the power of interactions and the fact that interactions are connected to our bodies, our physiology. And so that's leading to some work we're starting to do with simulated environments. So imagine a case in which you're putting a teacher in front of a screen that kind of simulates a classroom that she's interacting with, and these kids start misbehaving on the screen. And her job is to try to get them to stop misbehaving. And there are simulation activities that do that and that create stress for the teacher in the moment, and you can help them begin to manage that stress in the moment. So again, these are things that are sort of these are not ready for prime time tomorrow, but we're getting to a point where teacher preparation, the preparation of teachers, can be focused around what we know about the science of interaction and the tools for fostering interactions, and then opportunities to practice effective interactions that don't require you to be dumped into a classroom somewhere and try to sink or swim, which is how we train teachers now. So I think there's a lot of possibility there. And just finally, to wrap up, I think I just want to focus on this idea of a network and a collective. This idea that interactions matter is this little muscle, in our field, and I think we're beginning to develop an exercise program for that muscle. I don't know how long this analogy is going to carry on, so bear with me, all right? But I think, we all have a role kind of as the personal trainer here, and I think our efforts to keep those training programs focused and active and engaged in that actual activity that exercises that muscle. So this means when we implement tools, we implement them with fidelity. Okay, we don't start an exercise program. The trainer hands us 10 steps, and we say, "Oh, I'm only going to do these 3," and we hope to get in shape. Doesn't work. Okay, and so as we begin to think about how we work together in the field to move tools that look like they have some legs to be effective, we've got to work together to figure out how do we do that with the greatest amount of fidelity and the greatest amount of focus for teachers. And that's going to take us learning together to figure that out together. It doesn't work, by just dreaming up some tools at Teachstone and the university and seeing if they work. It works when we work with the field and we work together. My bet, is that what we will see, I think the other thing that we've got to be attentive to, particularly in early childhood, there's a lot of pressure on creating academic outcomes for kids. We all know that. And policymakers have placed a big bet on programs to produce those. I think we got to keep our eye on that prize, and at the same time we've got to keep our eye on the kind of softer skill prize. The actual social development, self-regulation, attention, language development, these kind of in-the-moment competencies that kids demonstrate and that actually are dependent on the qualities of interactions with teachers. And if we create environments in which teachers are enabled to stretch kids into those spaces, that they develop more self-regulation, they develop better language and communication skills, they develop better attention, and we create those spaces in ways that kids actually grow those skills year after year, I'm not going to be worried about the academic outcomes because I'm quite sure those are going to follow. And so focusing on these kind of core skills that are really the product of interactions, I think is going to be something that we need to pay attention to as well. All right, that's enough. I just think we have this tremendous start, first of many. Incredible opportunity to work together, and thank you for your partnership in that, and look forward to talking to you with some questions.
So just to start us off,
yeah.
And then I'm going to come out and roam the room and get other people to ask questions. You talked about a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of work going on. There's a ton of different things that we can do to help support teachers and get them better at interactions. Teachers in centers have, a ton of stuff being thrown at them, right? So do we, and should we should we be recommending that they do everything, boil the ocean, or how do you start?
Yeah, and I wouldn't want, so I did talk about a lot of stuff, but I said the word focus about 15 times, okay? And so if there's a takeaway, that's the takeaway, all right? So what we need to think about are ways of making teachers' lives simpler, okay? Because again, one of the things that happens is the complexity of the 15,000 things that we're trying to do. We ask them to make decisions about assessment. We ask them to figure out what curriculum you should be using. We ask them to do all these different things. And, oh, by the way, improve your instructional support scores while you're at it. And that's like a recipe for overload, okay? So I think there's an important role for us to try to back away some of that complexity from teachers. I think this is something that program directors can do, which is to try to filter and protect teachers a little bit from some of this ongoing. So make the decisions about curriculum, make all those other decisions outside of the demands on teachers' time and attention, and get the teachers to attend to what I'm doing day to day with kids in my classroom. That's the focus of teachers. That's where they find their sense of effectiveness. And our focus in working with teachers should be to kind of narrow the universe and support their focus on interactions rather than confusing them and overwhelming them with more stuff. Yeah, for sure. People have questions, yes?
Just so people can hear in the audience.
Okay, I'm Lisa St. Clair from Omaha, Nebraska. In the Fairfax study, how are you measuring curriculum use and how are you measuring executive functioning?
What we'll ask the teachers what curriculum they're using, and so we'll have a label of curriculum. But one of the things we all know, I think you all probably know this, that I could survey teachers and say, what curriculum you're using? Everybody would have the curriculum they're saying. And we go in the classroom and it's like, what is that? That doesn't jive, okay? So we're going to ask them, but we're also going to watch them, okay? So we're going to go in and have many observations over the course of the year where we're looking at what the kids are exposed to instructionally and content-wise, how much time they're exposed to that, and the nature of that exposure. So is it very oriented toward kind of rote and fact stuff, or is it oriented a little more toward problem solving? And so we'll have the curriculum, and we'll have some of the implementation work. The executive function measures are going to be, we're going to use, the NIH has a toolkit of assessments of executive function, and we're going to use a bunch of assessments from that. Yeah, they're all direct assessments of kids. They're not asking the teacher whether the kid's well behaved. It's actually seeing if the kid can do some impulse control activities and the like. Yeah, good question.
It almost seems a little late to work with teachers once they're in the classroom. I would love to see how we could impact teacher preparation.
Amen. Yeah, so.
The MMCI is probably your best kept secret.
Yeah.
We are using that. We wrote that in our 5-year plan, and we have taught it 5 times. We lack 2 people in our entire program that have not made it through the 20-hour course. We should have had that 5 years ago.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Sorry.
No, hey, look, I'm a dean of a school of education, and I can't, it's hard to get teacher preparation to move from my point of view, too. I think this is absolutely a core need. And again, this is where if we can build coalitions and partnerships in places where we could harness, interest on the teacher prep side, where students were getting credit, academic credit for that, okay? Or what we're doing, Bridget's been great working with our teacher preparation program, because our student teachers now at the Curry School are getting my teaching partner in some form when they do their student teaching, or they're getting a light course in the class early on so that their understanding of a classroom is shaped and organized so that when we do what we usually do, which is to send them in a classroom and say, oh, go observe in this classroom and come back and tell me what you see. They don't come back like, whoa, I don't know what I was looking at. I think part of it is like we talk about the class as a language and a lens, and if there was anything we could give beginning teachers, it would be a language and a lens. So I think there's great power here in the possibility of connecting around micro-credentialing, these sort of movements on badging, skills and competency-focused teacher prep. But this, when I said early childhood could lead, early childhood could really lead in this because there's a lot of room for shifting certification and credentialing systems in early childhood that there just isn't in the K-12 world. And we should be looking for ways to do that together. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Hi, this sounds very interesting. I'm from Louisiana. How can I impact my local universities? What is the first thing I can tell them to do or inform them of?
So I think you can, one of the things you can do is just inform them that there are actually a set of tools out there that will improve the interactions between teachers and kids. So universities have a big interest in that, because one of the forces on universities are, basically there's this kind of argument that teacher preparation doesn't produce good teachers. And sooner or later, universities are going to have evidence that they actually are producing effective teachers. So assessments of effective teaching are going to be very important to universities, and ways of ensuring that their preparation is improving kids, students is going to be real important. The number one factor that universities worry about, and their graduates tell them over and over again, is I don't know how to manage a classroom. And management is all about interactions. And so, again, those are the kind of conversations you can begin to have. We've had some contact with folks in Louisiana, more on the K-12 side, but I know that they're very interested in creating partnerships between local, and this is some of the ways that teacher prep is moving, that they're moving more toward residency models and partnerships between local users of teachers and the preparers of teachers, where the users are driving the conversation a little bit and saying to the preparers, hey, we need teachers with these competencies. You need to be, developing them. And that creates the conversation about what are some tools that can then enter and support that. Thanks, it's a great question.
Can you introduce yourself as well?
I'm Beth O'Connor from South Bend, Indiana.
Hi.
So in addition to efficiency, effectiveness, and scalability, how do we keep it affordable for small, not-for-profit organizations who are having to pay for, obviously, the important, the certifications, and then the cost of training for participants whom we don't charge them to attend. So I'm just wondering about the affordability piece as well.
Yeah, no, and I worry about that all the time, because you don't get the scale without being affordable, okay? And so, again, we have to kind of be a little patient on this, in the sense of we just got out and started this. We're not, sort of all the way there yet, by any means. And I think this is where, so when we do studies of my teaching partner coaching, for example, okay, people always look at that and they say, well, that's really expensive, and then at the same time, we need to look at two things. First is, well, do you already have coaches in your jurisdiction, that can be trained to coach a different way, so most of the expense goes there. And what are the key ingredients of the coaching so the coaching can be boiled down and made less expensive. So I think one of the big things, I give credit, I didn't have much to do with this, honestly, but this is really Mike's brainchild really was to say, we need to create a subscription service that lowers the cost for everybody and puts resources on a platform that then can be utilized by local folks in the way they need. So we're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction so that it doesn't become you have to pay for this thing over here and pay for this thing over here and pay for this. So we're trying to make everything cheaper and also make it more efficient and accessible. But ultimately, we have to figure out a way to do this sustainably and continue to innovate and do that in a way that delivers quality too. So so it's and I appreciate the fact, I run a nonprofit as a dean, and I appreciate how hard it is to make those sort of selections between what do we put our priorities on at any given point in time. Yeah.
Good morning, Dr. Pianta. This is
Hi.
Padma from Jacksonville, Florida.
Hi.
Now that you've created this amazing template for human interaction, I'm just going to suggest one thing for you. Doctor-patient interaction template.
Yeah. My brother actually
Negative
works.
comment.
My brother works in healthcare, and he's actually he's suggested doctor patient, nurse patient. I think the nurses are better off than the doctors. But yes, message received.
Hi, Lauren Meyer,
Hi.
New York City. That actually is a really good segue into something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is also something that in the past year or so, as we've rolled out the class tool in a larger scale than we have in the past, something our pre-K social workers have brought up several times, which is not the interactions between teachers and children that are very important, which are also obviously captured in the tool, and child-to-child interactions, which are somewhat captured in the tool, but the interactions between the teachers, the adults in the classroom. And we talk about toxic stress, and that's something that has actually been brought up by them in terms of how the relationship between the adults in the room is impacting the children in the classroom. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that and any research, and whether or not you think that has any place in a tool that's looking at all the interactions that are happening in a classroom.
So great question. You know, and I would say 5 years ago, I would have answered that question and said, I get it, it's important, can't focus on that. We got to get this part right, you know, and we're focused on teachers and kids. And I think we collectively as a company and as a field that need to be laser focused on teachers and kids and not get too distracted, and at the same time recognize that we have developed something that has may have some applicability to other forms of interaction that take place in a classroom that have implications for the interactions between teachers and kids. So, I would be very open to the idea of thinking about, what would be the lessons learned, from the class that could be extrapolated to the interactions between an aide and a teacher, co-teachers, or a director and a teacher. We get it a lot of times between questions between teachers and around teachers' interactions with parents, And I think there's some really, really simple lessons we could take from, what is the core value of, responsive engagement that we can see in examples in the class. Yeah. And then how can you transfer that into other interactions too? But again, I want to be careful about not losing focus either. So I think that's a delicate dance to do, but I think that is important. Yeah.
Hello, Nancy Johnson from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I feel really
Minneapolis. I miss it.
And I'm wearing a jacket. I can't believe how cold it is. Anyway, so, but I'm just wondering, we're working a lot more with new Americans, Somali, Hmong, et cetera, and every state has different populations in this. So we don't have Vietnamese, but California. So is there any money in the research or foundation community looking for what, are there adjustments needed with class or not, or how does this play out?
Well, a lot of people are paying attention to this, and I think this is something we, again, would be important for us to continue to engage with as a field, and to sort out how does one appropriately use a tool with a diverse population. So right now, in the Fairfax study, there's
80% of Fairfax are language learners,
Yeah.
and a huge portion of those are immigrants. Many of their classrooms, and I know some of you are like this, have 10, 11 different languages in a single classroom.
Yeah, so we will know from that study, how, in a sense, how universal some of these properties of interaction are that the class is picking up, and we'll also be attending to what are the nuances that we may be missing. I think that the critical thing in this is recognizing that if we have a problem at scale, we have a problem with millions and millions of kids and many, many hundreds of thousands of teachers, all of them are different in some form. And if we want to create systems that move all of those kids and teachers ahead, we've got to have some common framework that we can talk to each other about what's going on in all of those different classrooms. So it's not going to work to have an adaptation of any instrument, whether it's the class or whether it's the next best thing, that is adapted for every single group, because pretty soon you're going to have an adaptation for every single individual and classroom in a group. So the tension that we need to explore is what are the things that work across and in common. We need to continue to always look for evidence for that and make sure that we have evidence for those claims. And also, what are the ways in which we appropriately and sensitively engage different groups that have legitimate, that have very legitimate differences in their experiences or their understandings of interactions, so that we make sure that the tool works for those people too. And it may require another tool. But I think we want to be careful about thinking we need to adapt a tool under all sorts of circumstances. We need to make sure the implementation of any tool is really sensitive to context and implemented well, and that we have people who really understand, who are using it, who really understand those nuances and differences as they're using it. It's a really good question. There's a lot of interest in this. I think the Fairfax study and actually a bunch of other studies that are being done right now are really going to help us understand these questions. But so far, the evidence, when we've looked at, do higher class scores relate to better learning? Again, assessing better learning in a very culturally sensitive or linguistically sensitive way, and observing kids in the classroom, higher scores on the class are working in almost all circumstances. So in Turkey, in Ecuador, rural Ecuador, it's pretty different than United States. Colleagues in Chile, we just saw data yesterday from Kazakhstan, where appropriate use of the class as it's written, by folks who understand that culture, who have been trained in the class, higher scores are related to higher scores in the class are related to more learning and development for kids. So we don't want to throw that baby out with the bathwater as we're trying to also understand how to do this in a most appropriate and culturally sensitive way. Mike, we have to ask questions on this side of the room.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Brandy King, Arlington, Virginia. I really appreciate all the comments that you've shared this morning. And one of the things that I'm constantly thinking about is this push for and this urge for increased infant and toddler teacher preparation. And Bridget showed some pretty incredible data yesterday that showed just the drastic numbers of infant and toddler class alum versus pre-K alum. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how we actually can increase the numbers of teachers from the infant and toddler age groups, and how we can continue to increase their preparation, because there's a drastic need as we see at the federal, state, and local level.
This is, boy, you asked the hardest question I think there is, because what you're talking about is just, as we all know, it's a stunningly diffuse sector. It's really hard to get your arms around it in any sort of organized way. Head Start and Early Head Start become the closest thing we have to sort of an organized program. Otherwise, it's subsidized childcare and a free-for-all. So I believe that the promise of quality rating and improvement systems are to address exactly what you just talked about. And that's why I think that a couple different points about that will be states have got to figure out how to incent people to get in this profession and stay in this profession. That's not my job. We'll try to help them once they get in there and help them do a good job once they get in there. But states have got to figure that out. They've got to make it simple and easy. The quality rating improvement systems are too complicated. And I think they talk about a thing that distracts people's attention. I think if what we want are people in infant and toddler programs who know something about child development and know how to sit and talk effectively and take care of a 3-year-old and also take care of an 18-month-old and know that they need to be making sure that the kids are napping at the right time and then paying attention there. That's about interaction, and it's not about a lot of the other stuff that we've piled into quality rating and improvement systems. So I think we have to keep the safety and the hygiene stuff separately and make that's a given. Any classroom that goes into that, I should see that. It's a constant. And then what sits on the top of that are the qualities of teachers and the adults' engagement with kids there. So I wish I could answer that in a more, yeah, we got an answer for that. But I think that's the promise of these quality rating improvement systems. Is our job to make sure that these don't become sort of a sausage factory with 15 measures of quality that go in, and I get a rating of a 4, and Bridget gets a rating of a 4, or I get a 2, and Bridget gets a 2, but we don't even know what to do next in order to focus ourselves on how we need to get better. So, wish I had a better answer.
We have one more?
Any other questions? One more?
One more?
Nobody wants to take it.
I just want to say I didn't introduce myself, Kathy Berman, representing the great state of Arkansas.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Well, we'll have you at the convention. One more.
Have you thought about using the lever of NCATE or another accrediting body to try to build in major teacher engagement?
Okay, so the question is about using the levers of accreditation to build in assessments of teacher-child interactions. For sure. So I think, but again, this is going to be, you all will have much more influence in that than I ever would because, I'm the author of this scale. So, but I think the issue there is really accreditation is going to be attending to what are the competencies that teachers demonstrate when they exit teacher preparation? What are the competencies that teachers demonstrate when they go for a degree or when they go for a license or a certification? We're moving in that direction. I would encourage that we support that move because, whatever the competencies are, let's get measures out there. Let's force the field to actually start having to measure this stuff, and let's hold ourselves accountable to making sure that those measures have an evidence base. And when we get that going, then I think we've really then started to move in a direction that has some promise for doing this at a much bigger and more robust level. So great question. Thank you all very much. It's been really fun.